again, everybody, and welcome to Tiger Sidelines on MC22. It's remote learning time as we are remote, and you will learn from Gabe DeArmond and Dave Matter. Both join me. I'm Bo Bayman. On this edition of Tiger Sidelines, we'll talk about a stoppage in the women's basketball program, a huge win by Conzo Martin's team over the number 21 Ducks this week, and we'll start with the football team winning 41-0 and doing pretty much what it needed to do in a game at home against Vanderbilt. And Gabe, from start to finish, it starts with a fourth down stop and then a touchdown by the offense. From start to finish, this was a complete dominating win by the Tigers.
Yeah, there were two possessions there. Missouri had, I think, a missed field goal and then turned it over on downs where you thought, maybe they're letting Vanderbilt hang around a little bit, but then Vanderbilt didn't really show any interest in hanging around. I think it was a combination of Missouri playing very well and Vanderbilt not playing very well. It was the most dominant performance we've seen out of Missouri, certainly since that 38-0 win over Chad Morris's first Arkansas team, which is kind of the gold standard for the worst SEC teams we've seen. And that team in Vanderbilt probably would have played a scoreless tie in 14 overtimes on Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Dave, it was bad enough to get Derek Mason fired. The Tigers moved to 4-3, but Vanderbilt was really lifeless in that game, especially when Missouri did exactly what we talked about last week. We said, get on them early and don't give them any hope.
Yeah, and you can say, well, it's just Vanderbilt, but they've had some competitive games with people this year. I mean, that's why I think on the show last week, no one expected Missouri necessarily to score 41 points because, one, their offense hasn't been all that good this year other than when they played LSU. And Vandy has at least hung around in some games, but this one, not at all. Defense did everything they needed to do all the time. The offense was good enough, still not super explosive. It was kind of dink and dunk, and end of the game, you look down and like, wow, Basilak has 300 yards. But Larry Roundtree was fantastic. There was just no resistance from Vanderbilt. It was almost, I don't want to quote Kirk Herbstreit, but it was almost like they were waving the white flag there. They were ready to move on to the offseason.
Yeah, be careful with what you quote by Kirk Herbstreit, obviously. But you're right. And Coach Drink, I thought he did very, very well to keep feeding Larry Roundtree, Gabe, because they couldn't stop him.
Yeah, I mean, Roundtree had 160 yards, and that was one of his better games. I mean, still probably the Liberty Bowl last year is probably the best game he's played or a couple years ago as a Missouri Tiger, but that was really impressive and had some guys making plays and just everything just worked on that day, right? And like Dave said, I mean, this is an SEC football team, and I don't want any comments about Vanderbilt to take away from the fact that Missouri did what it should have done, has now won 4 out of 5, and it really is going to be favored to be a 6-4 football team this year, which that doubles the number of wins I predicted, and I might have been on the optimistic side of preseason predictions.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Dave, I got to give you credit. You know, we had a tweet last week. Somebody said, who's going to be the first 100-yard receiver? And you came up with Beatty, and that's who it ends up being on Saturday.
It's like the SEC defenses have forgotten how to cover running backs out of the backfield. We see this every week, and not just with Missouri, but he's such a weapon, and it just seems like there's no one near him when they throw those wheel routes or whatever they are. Sometimes they're just little dump offs, and he catches everything thrown his direction. They're finding a use for him, and it just seems like, and I don't have like the empirical data here. They just seem like they're better offensively and they win when he's included in the game plan and he's not just an afterthought. You don't have to give him 20 carries because he's not that kind of running back, but he's almost the perfect complement to a Roundtree.
And Dave, you mentioned it, Connor Basilak sort of, dink and dunk here, but all of a sudden he's the SEC freshman of the week again, the second time. And now there are some people saying, well, maybe he's the freshman of the year, but I mean, that's still to be seen.
There's some really good quarterbacks in this league who are putting up Heisman numbers, and he's not in their class, but they don't need him to be to win. And he's still completing. Somebody, a reader reached out to me today and said, gosh, he was really off on some of those throws. Do you think he has accuracy issues? He's still completing 70% of his passes. I mean, the season ended today, it'd be the second highest completion percentage in team history, second only to like Chase Daniel's 2008 year. So he's doing some good things. They just don't have game breakers on offense at the receiver position, really. And he has to be accurate. We've seen, receivers drop a lot of balls this year, not so much in that last game. But he's been really good. I mean, he's not Kyle Trask, but again, they don't ask him to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And on defense, everybody's talking about Nick Bolton, and with good reason. He, again, was all over the field Saturday.
Yeah, at one point, Arkansas had 20 snaps, and there had been 16 tackles made because incomplete passes obviously don't have tackles, and Bolton had made 7 of them. I mean, at this point, like if a tackle's made at Missouri, if you're not 100% sure who it is, just say it was Nick Bolton. You're probably going to end up being right. I've seen some, because there's talk, now Kobe Whiteside might come back and some of these guys might come back. And people on my website are really excited about the future of the defense. And man, we got so many guys coming back. And Mitchell Forty, who I work with, made a pretty good analogy last night. I mean, they're still almost certainly losing Nick Bolton. And that's like saying, I'm really excited about this Chiefs offense, even though Mahomes went somewhere else. I mean, like, yes, there are some pieces there, but Nick Bolton is the guy. I mean, that's the centerpiece. And we've talked, I'm sure we'll talk about how this game might be a battle for SEC Coach of the Year. I think this game actually features upcoming the 2 guys that are probably the front runners for SEC Defensive Player of the Year too.
Yeah, and let's just wrap up Vanderbilt with one last thing. Dave, Sarah Fuller making history for the Commodores, and a lot of people watched the game to hopefully see her kick, which didn't happen because the defense played so well.
Yeah, she had the kickoff right before the third quarter started. I thought it was a cool moment. I thought Missouri did a nice job. They had the ovation. The PA announcer recognized it. Depending on where you go on the internet or what you're reading, it's for some reason this became a very polarizing thing. I don't know why, but I guess it's just because that's our culture now, and everything has to either be the greatest thing ever or the worst thing ever. But I thought both sides handled it about as well as they could. I mean, Missouri players and Drinkwitz were very complimentary of what happened. The defense also did its part to make sure that she was pretty much just played a cameo. I mean, they didn't even have the option to kick a field goal or an extra point because Missouri's defense was so good. We'll see. She's possibly could kick for Vandy this week against Georgia, but if Vandy can't score against Missouri, I'm not sure they're going to get in field goal range against the Bulldogs. So, but yeah, I thought it was a cool moment. Was it the moon landing? I'm not sure about that.
So now we move on to the battle line rivalry with Arkansas. The Tigers are favored by 3 points, and this is a pretty good matchup, isn't it, Gabe? I mean, these are 2 teams on the rise, but on the rise from really the depths of the conference, but they've made strides this year.
Yeah. I know some Missouri fans are a little frustrated with how much attention and praise Sam Pittman and Arkansas have gotten when Missouri fans are going, but we're the ones that are over 500 and all that. And we beat LSU and they didn't, but you got to realize where Arkansas was coming from. I mean, they were 0-24 in the last 3 years. They were losing games to non-Power 5 programs like every season. So they've gone from just the depths of everything to maybe like about where Missouri was last year, or maybe even a little ahead of that. They're an okay team. I don't think they're great, and I don't think many people are accusing them of being great, but also we do this with our own teams and ignore it with other teams. We also have to admit Arkansas beat Auburn, and a bad call changed that game. So Arkansas should be 4-4 and kind of in a very similar situation to Missouri. Missouri has not improved as much as Arkansas because they were so far ahead, but these are 2 teams that have definitely overachieved. And I think, Jimbo Fisher and Dan Mullen are going to get some talk, but I think the winner of this week's game has to get heavy consideration for SEC Coach of the Year.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And one of the storylines you guys have touched on obviously already this week is Barry Odom coming back and coaching at Fargo Field again.
What? He is?
I'm sorry. Did I just break that news? Sorry.
Didn't realize.
I didn't mean to do that. But I mean, that's a big thing, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, and we knew this all along when he took that job. I think everybody probably thought, in the back of their mind, or maybe we said it out loud, probably like, well, that's going to be interesting when he comes to Columbia. Actually, at the time, we thought he was going to be in Kansas City because that's where the game was supposed to be until the pandemic hit and they moved it back to Columbia. So it just added another layer. A lot of storylines in this. I give Drinkwitz and the players credit. They didn't try to gloss it over and say, oh, it's no big deal. I mean, they all came out and said, well, yeah, this is our coach. He recruited 90% of this team, except for the few guys that signed, in February. He coached most of them. He's familiar with most of them. There's not bad blood between the players and Barry at all. And I doubt there's any between Drinkwitz and Barry. I mean, they share the same agent. They may not be chums, but I think there'll be a healthy respect for each other. And I thought Martez Manuel had the best quote of the week, saying, hey, this guy, I owe him everything. He gave me the scholarship. He put me on this team, played me last year. But the way I can show him the most respect is to prepare for this game like it's the Super Bowl. And I think that's a quote and a comment and a reaction that Barry would absolutely respect. He wants Missouri's best shot, and Missouri knows that they're going to get their best shot from him.
And this is a team in Arkansas that, since they are ascending and they're not used to winning, they're still playing hard. I mean, even in their losses recently, they're still playing hard. There are other teams you can't say that about. Arkansas is still playing hard.
Yeah, Sam Pittman and Barry Odom have gotten those kids to buy in. And, look, Missouri's been looking for a rival, right, for 9-10 years now. You don't make a rivalry by getting a tall trophy with an insurance company's name on it. And you don't do it by backup linebackers giving cheesy quotes before football games. The Missouri-Arkansas basketball rivalry got good when Mike Anderson went to Arkansas and then Frank Haith wanted to fight him at midcourt, right? I mean, that was the greatest thing that's ever happened in Mizzou Arena, and no one will change my mind. So what would make this just instant rivalry is Arkansas pitches a shutout and Barry Odom goes and plants a flag on the Tiger logo, right? I mean, I think we all know that's not going to happen, but this is a week where you wish two things would happen. One, that SEC assistant coaches were allowed to do interviews, and two, that football coaches would be honest in interviews, because there is 0.0% chance that when Barry Odom was sifting through job offers, somewhere, and I'm not even going to say in the back of his mind, somewhere very close to the front of his mind was, where can I come back and beat these guys and beat that athletic director who said I wasn't good enough? And like Dave said, no bad blood with the players, no bad blood with Eli Drinkwitz. Barry Odom and Jim Sturk ain't going to be fist bumping or elbow bumping at midfield on Saturday. Yeah,
no doubt about it. And Dave, final thing on this, it'll be interesting because they are using it as senior day. Nick Bolton, a junior, even going to be recognized because they view it as his last home game. There still could be a home game with Georgia, but they just want to make sure that they go out this way. And I just wonder, and I don't know if Barry Odom would have any role in that other than just to see the guys after.
Yeah, it's a little awkward, and he coaches from the press box now. He might find, those guys behind the scenes, and everything's behind the scenes these days because, we can't really see anything. Maybe he'll, go find somebody or they'll find him. I think they'd all like that little closure. Harder to do after the game because somebody's a winner and somebody's a loser. But yeah, I think this is interesting with Bolton. I mean, it's obvious he's gonna go to the NFL, or at least he's leaning that direction. I don't remember them ever doing this with another guy. I mean, it's not like Jeremy Macklin. We all said after games, hey, did you get your rock, Jeremy Macklin, or Blaine Gabbert or Alden Smith? But I don't remember them actually honoring them as juniors. I've seen it at other places, but not like this. So it's good for Nick. I think everybody likes him. Everybody admires him, and he'll get his moment.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we will talk a little basketball, a big win against the Ducks for the Tigers. We'll talk about that more when we come back. You're watching Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Welcome back, everybody. This is Tiger Sidelines, remote learning style. Gabe DeArmond, Dave Matter, and I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks for joining us as always. And let's talk basketball. The basketball team is 2-0. They beat Oral Roberts 91-64. We haven't really talked about that game. They came out and took care of business there. But the one that everybody's talking about is the one 83-75 over Oregon up in Omaha. They were obviously supposed to go to a tournament that got canceled, but then they decided to play Oregon up in Nebraska, and it was a very good win early in the season for Conzo Martin's team. And Gabe, really from about 4 minutes into that game, from then on, they had the lead and took control.
Yeah, they led for 38 minutes and 27 seconds of that game. And it was, there was a little bit of angst. Oregon made a little bit of a run at the beginning of the second half, got it to 5. Xavier Pinson hit a big shot. Then they made a little bit of a run, around 2.5 minutes left. They got it back to 5. That one never really seemed to me like Oregon was close enough to make it scary, because Missouri's a really good free throw shooting team, and Mark Smith made a couple, and they were pretty safe there. And I know there was a little bit of angst, but look, that's a top 25 team. And I think Oregon's going to be a problem for some people down the road. That was their first game. Missouri had a tune-up, which I thought certainly helped. But that's about as dominant a performance as you could ask for. And I think certainly the biggest non-conference win Conzo Martin has had here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And there were some guys from Oregon missing. They're waiting on some transfers. They had an injury, but nevertheless, that to me, Dave, is going to be a huge resume win in a couple of months.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody will care that much who you're missing, because that's what this year is going to be like for everybody. There's going to be games where Missouri is going to have guys missing. It's just inevitable. So yeah, and I think what makes that win even more impressive is that's the game they've always lost at the beginning of the year, when you have that one high profile, not talking about the bragging rights game, but whether it's Xavier or they've played some other decent teams from the high major conferences, this time of year, and whether they play well or not, they always end up losing them. And it's just kind of you just kind of lose. You have that loss this early. It's hard to kind of gain momentum. I mean, if they win on Sunday and they go to Wichita State, it'll be the first time Missouri's 3-0 since Frank Hayes last year. So it's hard to think of. They just don't win these games very often. And that is, like Gabe said, it's a good Oregon team. They'll be better when they have their full lineup. But impressive win, and impressive too, because Drew Smith is in foul trouble and did not have a good game. Mark Smith had a great first half, didn't really do much in the second half. They just turned to other guys, and other guys answered, and they didn't have to be all great at the same time. Xavier Pinson and Javon Pickett, carried them offensively for long stretches. And, it's neat to see that when it can be different guys in different halves. And they've got to, we said all along, if they're going to be good this year, it's got to be because the experience pays off, and it did in that game.
Yeah, no doubt about it. In the first half, it was Mark Smith red hot, and they kept on feeding him, which was good. And Jeremiah Tillman had a big game underneath, quietly pulling down lots of rebounds, scoring when he needed to. And then in the second half, Gabe, as you alluded to, Xavier Pinson ended up with 22. He had 19 in the second half. And when they really needed a bucket, he hit a big three, kind of to calm everybody down. And he was the calming force and the leader in the second half.
Which is interesting, because I thought he was completely out of control and did not play well for about the first 15 minutes of the game, but kind of reined himself back in. And he is the one major criticism I've had of this team. And Jordan Geist was this 2 years ago, but they weren't good enough for it to matter. But when you have to have a basket, when you've got a possession that, hey, everybody looks at this possession and says, we got to get something here. Who's your guy, right? And this team hasn't had that. I mean, and Drew Smith doesn't seem like a takeover kind of guy. He's just the kind of guy that makes everybody better. X is developing into that a little bit. I think the guy that not only that he wants the ball, but that his teammates say, we want you to have the ball. Now, all that said, I think you hit on it. The key to this team is still Jeremiah Tillman, because the first half, yeah, Mark Smith was shooting well, but like the rest of the team really didn't. They jacked up 21 threes in that first half, and Mark Smith made enough that it went well, but this team is still at its best when it's going to run things through Tillman. And I thought we saw last night, he's becoming a better passer out of double teams. He's not turning the ball over as much. He's averaged 9.5 rebounds the first 2 games. I mean, I guarantee you, if you ask Conzo, we're just going to give you 9 and 9 out of Jeremiah every single night this year, he would say, I don't even have to play him. Just give me that, and I'm good every game.
And the other thing was that defensively and offensively, they didn't turn the ball over. They were getting rebounds when you thought, oh gosh, get that board. They got those boards. They got boards over people. They got box guys out. I just thought it was very fundamentally sound, Dave.
Tillman is ripping the ball off the glass with authority this year. I mean, you've seen him do it. He's never rebounded like this. That's always, I thought, has been the knock on him. This guy's averaged like 4 or 5 rebounds a game. Like, how are you that big and that strong over all these guys you play? I mean, there's no such thing as 6'10" veteran centers in college basketball, because if you're that big and that good, you leave early. He's a total luxury. So if he can live up to that and play like he has these 2 games, who knows how far this team can go, because they haven't had this before. But yeah, the turnovers are huge. Second fewest ever in a game under Martin, only 7. And it seemed like they all came in bunches early. After that, they settled down and were just fine.
And maybe what we're seeing, Gabe, and I don't want to make excuses, but maybe we're seeing a healthy Tillman, and that's the difference.
Could be. And I want to, let's not completely overreact to one game in early November, right? I mean, if people forget, they beat Auburn last year. They beat Florida. So, okay, now I want to see you go to Wichita and do this on the road, and then come home and actually beat a Liberty team that doesn't have the name of Wichita, but is probably a better team than Wichita. So you start out 4-0, you're going to start having some things to feel pretty good about. But we've seen in flashes this team be good for the last 2 to 3 years, but we haven't seen it consistently be good. So that's kind of the next step is, okay, Pinson, come out and do this again. Tillman, do this again. Mark Smith, keep shooting 40%, and I'm not trying to be a wet blanket, but especially in college basketball, we jump to so many conclusions. I mean, Kentucky's 0-2 right now. And if you don't think Kentucky's going to be in contention for the SEC title in late February, then you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, and here's the overarching thing to me is it's what you talked about. We've talked about is you have to get people back interested in basketball. That's the main goal. Yes. And you do that by winning, and you win a game on the road or at a neutral site against a ranked opponent. People will say, oh, okay, well, when's their next game? And that's what has to happen.
Yeah. One thing I'm really interested for is what are road games going to be hard this year with small crowds? Can you steal some on the road that normally wouldn't? And on the flip side of that, do you have a home court advantage? I mean, if there's only a couple 100,000, maybe 2,000 people at Mizzou Arena, that one edge you might have on one of those Saturday games where the fans actually show up, will you have that anymore? I don't know. It's going to be crazy. And I think, and again, don't want to overreact too much. This league could be wide open. I mean, Kentucky does look vulnerable. Tennessee hasn't even played yet. Auburn is going to be an off year. Usually you can count Bruce Pearl's team for being right up there. They can't even play in the postseason this year, which was smart on his part. Arkansas could be good, but they haven't really played anybody yet. So there's no reason Missouri can't. They play like this last night. They can't be better than the 8th or 9th or 10th seed and maybe shoot for that upper class in the league.
You know what the best part about sports with no fans is we're watching these NFL games. You can hear the calls at the line. You can hear golfers talking with their caddies. Last night when Jeremiah Tillman puts up an 18-footer and somebody on the broadcast just goes, oh, hell no.
I thought it was him. I thought he said it. So
it might have been. I don't know. But somebody clearly said it. And it was my favorite part of the game without question.
Well, speaking of teams that haven't started yet, Robin Pinchton's team has slowed down because they have been full affected by COVID-19. They've canceled their next 3 games, and really we're uncertain about when they're going to play again, Dave.
Yeah, they've canceled 3 and they had to postpone that SLU game. They said postpone instead of cancel, which means maybe they can make it up. But it's a shame too, because those are 2 Power 5 high major games they had to cancel against TCU and Texas Tech. Now their release, they've been quiet about this, but their release said they only had 1 case, and it's the subsequent contact tracing. This team's already been in full lockdown mode in preseason because of COVID-19. So it's a shame. This is a team that has to play together on the floor because they have all these new pieces. But we're not going to hear from them for a while.
Mizzou just scared to death to play SLU in any basketball, man. It's such a shame.
That's always what everybody says. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, a couple of tweets from Big E, and we'll close out with what Missouri has to do against Arkansas this weekend. You're watching Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks for joining us on Tiger Sidelines. Don't forget, we're at Tiger Sidelines on Twitter. And Big E says, did it seem like either play calling or Connor Basilak didn't like using the middle of the field enough? Maybe we need to try those big tight ends or the slot receivers. Most throws outside the numbers. Seems like we could help drives by going to the middle of the field. Is he right?
Maybe he was 30 for 37 for 318 yards and they scored 41 points. I mean, I don't know what we're complaining about.
They don't really have big tight ends right now. Daniel Parker Jr. hasn't played. Logan Christopherson hasn't played. Messiah Swinson played the most of his career, but I think he had his first career catch. So they don't have Alberto right now. They don't have a great receiver or tight end. I think it's anytime he does throw for 300 yards, it's practically a miracle. I mean, they're getting by with what they have right now.
Or they played Bo Pelini.
Yeah, right. And then the other one from Big E says something about, is this going to be a blessing in disguise having to play young guys against SEC talent rather than like Eastern Michigan or SEMO?
Well, it's probably a good thing they didn't play BYU. So I mean,
maybe Louisiana.
Yeah. So I don't know. I hate to say this, but it is what it is. You can't control it at this point. Yeah, I think you get better by playing better competition, and record may not be as good, but then again, maybe it'll be better. So I don't know. I think this has been a good thing for Missouri. There's no way to now that we know the result of at least 7 of the 10 games, this is not a negative.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Quickly before we get out of here, your thoughts about this weekend, Gabe? I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think Missouri's hot. I think Arkansas is much improved from the last couple of years, obviously, but I just think Missouri's a better team right now. I think they're a little more well-rounded. Arkansas's 3-0 when it wins the turnover battle, 0-5 when it's even or doesn't. This is a little bit Kentucky-like. Hang on to the football. I think Missouri beats them by about a touchdown.
Yeah, just watch out for the turnovers. I mean, after a couple of weeks, Arkansas had all those interceptions. It was like, well, that could be a fluke. I don't know. They lead the country. So they're doing something right over there. They give up a lot of yards, but they also create their own luck. So if Connor Basilak just plays under control, which he does for the most part, I think Missouri wins this game.
All right, we'll talk about it next week. Thanks to Gabe and Dave, and also behind the scenes, Matt and Brian. I'm Bo Bayman. We'll see you next week on the Sidelines. You've been watching Tiger Sidelines right here on MC22.